this is Meridith Elliott Powell, and you know what time it is. It is time for Thrive, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. Because no matter what is happening in the marketplace, it is the best opportunity for you to grow your business. We're going to start the show today. We're going to talk about resilience, everything that you need to know to make a comeback, get through your biggest obstacles, create opportunity even in the face of your greatest challenges. And we have a really special guest here today. I want to welcome to the show today, my guest is Sheryl Green. Sheryl, for those who don't know you that are watching the show, tell us a little bit about you and go ahead and talk about the new book as well.
Awesome. So hi, my name is Sheryl Green. I am a mental health speaker and author living here in normally sunny Las Vegas. Normally, it's a little gray today, but that's okay. I am recently married, just got married in March.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm the mom to 2 amazing rescue dogs and 180 houseplants.
Okay.
Give or take a few.
I want to know how you got into mental health, where exactly your focus is. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about your new book.
Yeah, so hold on.
Hold it up.
So it's called You Had Me at No, How Setting Healthy Boundaries Helps to Banish Burnout, Repair Relationships, and Save Your Sanity. And, this was 40 something years in the making.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago, I hit a metaphorical brick wall and I almost hit a physical one, and realized that something major in my life had to give. I was working 18 hours a day. I was doing for absolutely everyone. I wasn't taking care of myself, and I lost it. I just plain lost it. Turned out that the problem I had been experiencing my entire life was I had really unhealthy boundaries. I didn't know how to say no to people. I didn't know how to voice my opinion and talk about what I needed and what my priorities were. And I was living for everybody else.
This is such a common problem, right? I mean, when I first learned about boundaries, I remember thinking, I learned about boundaries because I was in I was in Al-Anon, because my first husband, most of my family have a lot of alcoholics in my family. And I remember learning about boundaries and at first resisting them because it felt really uncomfortable. Then once you kind of go over the hump and you learned, I thought, why don't they teach us this in kindergarten? Where does this come from? Like, why don't we know how to set boundaries?
Yeah, so it's our childhoods. I mean, I hate to blame everything on our parents, but they're easy scapegoats. But really, if you've never been taught that you have the right to speak your mind, that you have the right to tell people when you are uncomfortable or when something they're doing is really not okay, if you've never been taught that, you don't even know it's a thing. Right. I kind of compare this to growing up in outer space and, your first look at gravity and you're like, well, what is this? I don't understand, because you've never been exposed to it. And I think, unfortunately, there's so many people out there with dysfunctional boundaries. It's difficult to teach healthy ones if you don't know what they are.
Yeah. So how do you know you need to learn to set boundaries?
Oh, well, if you're burned out right now, if you have nothing left over at the end of the day for you, if you find it difficult to say no to people, even though you don't want to do something, even though you get that nasty gut feeling that's like, oh gosh, I can't say yes to another thing, but you just can't say no. If people borrow your things and they give them back broken or stained, or they don't give them back at all, it's very easy for us to play the victim here. Yeah. It's very easy to say, like, well, they're taking advantage of me, or, they're doing things that aren't right. But ultimately, we just haven't taught them how we expect to be treated.
Do you think that not setting boundaries is a little bit of its own addiction? Like, and what I mean by that is that, you know, there's a little bit of a high in being a victim. There's a little bit of a high in being the martyr. There's, there's a little bit of a rush in that drama, whether you like the rush or you don't like the rush. I think it's sort of the same way, like an alcoholic probably doesn't love being drunk, but you're so addicted to that high. Do you think there's any of that there?
I think there's a lot of comfort in it. It's what we know. It's scary to step out of our comfort zones. And people pleasing absolutely is an addiction.
Yeah.
When you feel the need to make everyone around you happy at the expense of yourself, like, yeah, that's an addiction. And this is a slightly weird way of looking at it, but part of my background is in anthropology. And, we learned about this like tribal mentality. And ultimately, we people please because we're afraid of being eaten. We're afraid of being cast out of the tribe. And that's the worst possible thing that can happen, because then, a passing wildebeest could take you out. Nobody's got your back. And we equate that with, if I make people happy, if I do what they want, I will be safe.
Right.
And unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way. And it just kind of gets ugly from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said that this book was 40 years in the making, and you've written other books.
Yeah.
So what propelled this one? Like, why now?
So there were two kind of instances. The first one was about 2 years ago. I was driving down the road, and like I said, 18 hours a day. I was working full time for an animal rescue. I'm a huge animal advocate. I was running my own business because you don't make a lot of money in nonprofit. And I couldn't deal with life anymore. That's the easiest way to put it. I was driving down the road. I started seeing the oncoming headlights. And I thought, if I just cross this median, it'll all be over.
Yeah.
And scared the heck out of me, obviously, pulled off the road. But, it still took another, I'm going to say 9 months of saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
And I actually agreed to be president of our local NSA chapter.
Great.
And instantly, or the incoming president, I should say, instantly was like, what did I just do? Like, I'm planning a wedding. My parents are older and they need me. Like, I'm rebuilding a business. Like, what did I do? And that was kind of the impetus. That was the realizing, like, I said yes because I didn't want to let people down. And ultimately, I was going to let them down so much harder.
Yeah.
So I nicely stepped away, and it's good I did, because I actually lost my mom a couple of months ago. So the timing would not have been ideal. But I stepped away and realized, like, oh, I better learn about boundaries, and then I want to teach other people.
Yeah. Had you known about boundaries, and it's just something that you were aware of them, but just hadn't learned to set? No.
I don't even think. I mean, I've heard of them.
Yeah.
I knew they existed. But no, I didn't recognize them in other people either. I just thought that they were, not cool. I asked them to do something and they said no. And I was like, well, I don't even understand.
Yeah.
So no, it was really a very foreign concept.
Yeah. The thing that I love this subject of boundaries, because I think it's, I think it's so important to learn to set them for a number of reasons. One, to take care of yourself, but for the other reason is we all have these people in our lives who don't set boundaries, and they let us down like crazy. They're the people who call at the last minute and can't show up for an event that you planned together, or they only do things not very well. And it's not because they're bad people. It's just because they're really over committed. And I'm still a little, I don't know that you ever really recover from this, but my story with boundaries was I had never heard of them either. And there's so much I want to ask you about on how people learn to navigate it. But my first husband passed away from alcoholism, and he was quite sick, alcoholic. And we were in this song and dance every day where I would go to work, I would earn the money, I would come home, and he would be drunk, and we would have a huge fight. I would go my way, he would go his way. But one day I came home from the office, same old thing. I walk in with a different, same expectation that he would be sober, and he wasn't. We got in a huge fight. Credit cards are charged up. He's drunk. But for some reason, he didn't yell at me. And he just let me yell like crazy until I was exhausted. Mm-hmm. And then he looked at me and he said, he used a bad word, but he said, who asked you? And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I thought, who did ask me to support the family, to pay all the bills, to go to work every day? And even if he did beg me to do it, I still was making the choice. I didn't have to do it. And it was, I always, I rarely talk about that part of my life, but I always, when I do, I say to people, I thought I was saving his life. And ironically, he ended up saving mine. And that's when I went to Al-Anon. And that's when I found out about boundaries, and that I could no longer blame him for the mess my life was. I was making those choices every day. So I want to talk a moment about, because that switch, I think, is hard from being the martyr to realizing that your life's a mess because it's your fault. It's a mess. Now, I found that really empowering, because once something was my fault, I could fix it. It wasn't everybody else's fault. But I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah. So it's funny, because when I was going through a divorce, God, we're like 15 years out of it now. Yeah. And I remember reading every self-help book I could get my hands on. And one of them talked about victimhood. And it said, the moment that you decide you're not a victim is the moment that you get that power. Because if things are happening to you, you can't control that.
Right.
But if you're making and allowing things to happen, now the ball's in your court.
Right.
And I horribly paraphrased that. I don't even remember what book it came out of.
Yeah.
But I know it really stuck with me, because I did have a traumatic divorce, and it was something that happened to me. But I had to look back further and say, like, well, why did I end up with this guy?
Exactly.
So I think that's really it. It's that acceptance. And it is, like we said, it's so easy to be the victim. It's just simple, like, oh yeah, well, the world's happening to me.
It's also on some levels, I think, a little fun. Like, it's far more fun to call you on the phone and complain about my life than actually go out there and have to fix it.
Oh yeah. Way less energy.
I mean, I'd much rather go out and have a glass of wine with you and talk about how awful things are, than actually go out and fix it, because that's where the hard part is, right?
Yeah.
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 So how did you start down the road? So there you are. I mean, that's kind of, we make change when pain becomes bad enough, right? And obviously the pain was bad enough. But let me tell you, I don't think setting boundaries was probably easy. So what did you do and how did you get started?
So it starts way beyond the last 2 years. I went to school. I have a master's in forensic psychology, and people joke around that you go into psychology to figure out what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Very true. You sit through every undergrad psych class going like, oh yeah, that's me. Oh wait, that's my mom. Oh, that's my grandmother. Like it's very true. And hopefully you don't do that in a criminal psych class. But I've always been really into personal development. I've seen therapists on and off my entire life. Like I'm a big believer in just constantly growing and constantly learning. And no, it is not an easy thing to just wake up one day and be like, I have boundaries now. And I actually, the first book that I read, I don't have it over here, but it's called Boundary Boss. And that was my wake up call of, okay, this is a thing. And this is something that I'm going to have to really dig deep into my past to figure out why I don't have healthy boundaries and how do I get to them. And that kind of kicked off my journey. And it's funny because she recommends in the book, she goes, do not walk up to the people in your life and tell them like, I'm getting boundaries now. It does not end well. And I did not listen to that advice.
Oh,
And I went to my parents, who I love very, very much.
yeah.
And you know, they did need me a lot more. And I was like, well, I'm getting boundaries and, you know, I'm going to work on this. And, you know, my stepmom said, like, does that mean you're not going to do anything for us anymore? And I was like, oh, okay. So, you know, but I really had to, it's practicing. It's constant practice. And a lot of the work, I like to say, is done in the rearview mirror, because it's looking back at a situation. You know, something happens, someone asks you to do something and you say yes, and instantly the regret comes. And maybe you do it half-assed, maybe, you know, you let them down, however it works. But looking at that and saying like, okay, I was given a choice and I'm not happy with the choice that I made. And how could I do this differently in the future? And how do I recognize that feeling within myself that something hasn't, you know, something's awry? And the next time that you're presented with that situation, it's not to beat yourself up, but the next time that something happens like that, you have that little bell in your head that goes like, oh, we've been here before.
Right.
Maybe it wasn't the exact same thing, but we've been here before, and we have the opportunity to do this differently now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been most of my journey.
You know, you mentioned something that I think is interesting and hard for people to navigate when they learn to set boundaries. I had a lot of people that I loved in my life, and when I set boundaries, that made them really uncomfortable. And so, you know, people will tell you to do the things that you need to take care of yourself until it interrupts their patterns, right?
Yeah.
And one of which, my mother's passed now. I mean, I adored my mother, what a rock in my life, but she struggled with my boundaries shifting a lot. And I think that's difficult, especially when it's a loved one, a family member, a spouse or a significant other, or things like that. How do you help people navigate those challenges?
That's an interesting way to phrase that. So the first thing I would say is it's not actually your responsibility.
Yeah.
We have all been led to believe that we have control over other people's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We make them angry, we make them happy, we make them sad with whatever our behavior or whatever our words are. But in reality, the only one that has the responsibility and the control over us is us.
Right.
So I wouldn't necessarily put the responsibility on someone to make somebody else comfortable with their boundaries. I would say communicating clearly is probably the most important thing. We often think that we have not made our case, but that we've stated what we need to state clearly and concisely, and really we're all over the place, and the other person is just kind of staring at us, you know, with the dog look. So I think being clear about it is the most important thing. I think the second thing is accepting that what you're doing, how you're changing may trigger somebody else, and they may choose to be upset about it.
Yeah.
Like put that as well as I can. And realizing you ultimately do not have control over that.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't. It's a matter of sitting there and accepting and being like, I see that you are upset, and, you know, I'm going to sit here and allow that to happen, rather than kind of like kowtowing to those uncomfortable feelings. Just kidding. I'll do it for you.
Right.
So I would say those are probably the two things. And that third one, which nobody likes to hear, not everybody is going to be okay with your new boundaries. And some people are going to drop out of your life. And that's actually a good thing.
With some people, it just takes a little bit of time and they'll come,
Yeah.
they'll come back to you. So what can people find in the book? I mean, so this book has been 40 years in the making. You obviously read a lot of other books about boundaries, but what is it that you wanted to say, and what did you want to put in there that you thought would be valuable to people?
So, we've probably all heard that adage that no is a complete sentence.
Yes.
And I think that's lovely. But until you believe that you have the right to say no, it's useless. And that was one of the big things that I wanted to express throughout this book, was giving people permission to express their needs, to say no, to say, hey, I'm feeling really uncomfortable with the way that you're talking to me or touching me or whatever it may be. Giving people permission to do that. That was a big thing. And, looking at those old ugly beliefs that we've all got, and look, still battling them, I think that's a lifelong journey. But what are you holding on to? And how is it making your decisions right now? And in the book, I likened it to an 8-year-old is driving your life right now.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't give an 8-year-old your keys, maybe don't let an 8-year-old mind and an 8-year-old heart make your decisions.
Yeah.
So those were some of them. I talked about how to make decisions, how to stop the yes vomit. Sorry for the graphicness there, but we get posed these questions, these opportunities, these requests for help, and we can't help the yes but come flying out of our mouth. And I talk a lot about how to stop that yes. And look, if ultimately you decide you want to do something, it helps further your goals. You want to do it out of love and not fear. Like, there's so many reasons that you could want to do something. But if you don't want to, like, it's okay to say no.
Yeah. Right.
And get, again, that permission, like, it's okay to say no, and it's okay to take the time to think about it and figure out what is the next move. Like, what is your answer that's not just guided by, the yes vomit.
I also think when it comes to boundaries, not to worry about perfection. Sometimes I'm really good at it. Sometimes I still say yes to people just because I want them to get off the phone, or I need to. I mean, I find myself after all these years, but I always know that I've crossed a boundary when I wind up angry about what I said yes to do.
Yep.
And I'm in it. And I fall back into my old pattern of wanting to blame the other person when the truth is I'm in the position I'm in. Because of that. Well, it's hard to believe, but we are just about to the end of our time. So I like to end with 2 questions. One is super easy. I mean, obviously, how do people find out more about you? How do they find out more about the book? But what is your biggest piece of advice to people out there? I mean, we are living in some of the most uncertain times. I mean, I think half the reason we say yes to things is out of fear. I might miss an opportunity, or, I might, this could, I can't lose that connection, as you said, type of a thing. Where do people start? What do they need to do? And how do they find out about you?
So I'll start with the easy one first.
Yeah.
You can find me at youhadmeatno.com, or at SherylGreenspeaks.com. Both of them will get you to me. What's the one thing that I think people need to know to start? You know what? Actually, I just typed it this morning. The best time to start a boundary was 20 years ago. The next best time is today.
Nice.
Just because you haven't had healthy boundaries in the past doesn't mean you are stuck with a lifetime of resentment and exhaustion.
Yeah. And, I think what you're saying is so powerful too. Like, we don't have to set boundaries in every area of our life. We'll get there. Just start with one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
start with one, and it can be a little one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's, they're muscles just like anything else, and you got to flex them.
Absolutely. Well, Sheryl, you have been amazing. We'll make sure that your book, everything is all in the show notes. This is such an important topic. I mean, when I think about business as well. If I don't learn to set boundaries, I don't have time to focus on the things that I want to do in order to grow my business and help my people be successful. So I really want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank you for discussing this important topic. And you, the audience, as always, you are amazing. Don't forget to join us right back here next week for another episode of Thrive, the show where we discuss everything that you need to know, soup to nuts, to turn uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. We will see you next week.